So I've been following this story obviously from the beginning. And I'm not sure, like, first of all, I'm new to my job at Fall River Reporters. I've only been here for about a month. I do writing and investigative stuff for Mike over at Fall River Reporter. My plan is to just kind of put this into a write-up, pretty casual. What I'll do is I'll ask you some questions. I'll write it up and then I'll send it over to you. If I can get an email from you, you can take a peek at it just to make sure it's all okay, before I go to print. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay.
My email is mellolaw, MELLOLAW, @msn.com.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
How did you get selected for this? I don't know the difference between a special prosecutor and a regular prosecutor. How did you get chosen for this, by the way?
Well, I received a call from the district attorney, Michael Morrissey, over in Norfolk County, and they were looking for someone with some extensive trial experience, criminal matters, and my name came up, and they called me, and we met and discussed the matter, and I agreed to take the position. Special prosecutor is basically one that's appointed by the district attorney when there's a potential conflict in the office in terms of issues that have occurred. For instance, here we had Mr. Kearney attacking members of the district attorney's office on his various blogs. So the office felt it'd be appropriate to get someone who had not been on the receiving end of that, if you will, and bring somebody completely independent in. My function is completely independent of the district attorney. I don't need approval to do anything.
Interesting. I didn't understand that. I didn't know. And I tried to take a look at it just before I called you, and I couldn't come up with an answer to that. So that it kind of makes some sense. You're not related to this anyway. They can't have anybody do it. So they needed somebody completely independent. So can you help me work through a couple things? He had a bunch of counts that were put forth. And then you guys went back again on Friday. How did it get moved to Superior Court from District Court?
I presented a case to a grand jury on various charges. The grand jury reviewed the case. As is the practice, the district attorney then leaves the room, and the grand jury debates and deliberates over whether or not they're going to find probable cause, and they did on those particular counts.
And so that second set of charges, I think, was it 3? Those went in front of the Superior Court judge on Friday, right?
Well, there were a number of charges that did. There were counts on intimidating a witness. There were counts on conspiracy to intimidate a witness, and counts on actually, the statute calls it parading or in front of a witness. Witness is a broad term in the statute because it encompasses a number of different individuals, witnesses, court personnel, etc. But it's all the same types of acts that are involved. And we allege that Mr. Kearney had engaged in those acts, which are criminal, under Chapter 268, Section 13A, which is the parading, and 268 13B, which is intimidating.
His attorney or his team was saying that the Friday court appearance was a win because they removed the parameters of like the no contact, I guess, that he had. Did you interpret it that way, or what is your interpretation of that?
We didn't interpret it that way at all. In an abundance of caution, we asked the judge to impose some restrictions, which the judge declined to do. Did not feel he had the authority to do that, which was okay with us because essentially any violation of the law and would trigger a bail revocation. Right. No different than if conditions had been imposed and those conditions were violated. We, based upon Mr. Kearney's prior activities, we didn't think it would be long before he would cross the line again. It seemed to be more brazen after he left court on Friday, and he, in fact, the following date began intimidating.
Did you, So were you notified of the BOLO, be on the lookout? Was your office notified of that?
Okay, as soon as it came out, yes.
Yeah. Do you know where he was during that time? Do you have any idea? Because between the time that they were looking for him and the time he turned himself in, it was the Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, all day Saturday. Do you know where he was at that time?
No.
No.
We do not, and we were honestly not really actively seeking him.
Oh, okay. So it was really just going to be a situation where he turned himself in, which is what actually occurred.
Well, we anticipated that would happen at some point. He had indicated he was going to turn himself in on the Saturday, but he did not do so. And he ended up coming in I'm sorry, not on the Saturday. Yeah, I believe it was a Saturday. And he ended up coming in on the Monday.
On the Monday. Was Monday or Tuesday?
I'm sorry, Tuesday.
Right. So we said he was going to come in on.
The holidays.
I know, me too. Everything is so like weird and skewed because of those 2 days. So do you know if there was, I mean, obviously there must have been some communication between his attorney and he while he was kind of waiting to turn himself in. There was word saying that the state police were reportedly searching for him. Do you know anything about that?
If he was spotted, he was certainly going to be taken into custody.
Right.
But I didn't have troopers out looking for him, no.
What, you could have though, right? If you wanted to, you could have done that?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it because of the holiday that you chose not to?
That was a part of it, obviously.
Yeah. He has small kids, right? 2 small kids?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you know that his ex-girlfriend was going to be a witness in this case? When did she become a witness?
She became a witness recently. We received some communication from her, and I had a summons served on her on Friday. The summons had been prepared before our Superior Court appearance, and after Superior Court appearance, she was served with the summons.
So your connection with her was she contacted you first? You didn't have any reason to contact her until she reached out to you?
That's correct.
In court, just sidetrack, in court, was there a restraining order put on him for her? I can't get clarity on that.
This week there was, yes.
Okay. That was for 10 days. Is she going to have to go back in front of the court and ask for that to be extended even though he's incarcerated?
Yes.
Okay. So within 10 days, she's going to have to go back again. The audio recording that he released, that was a previous interaction with them. I think there's some confusion because it was released around the same time as this arrest or whatever. This was not what occurred on Friday. This was a previous interaction between them, right?
That particular recording, to the best of our knowledge, took place in the early morning hours of Christmas Eve.
Oh, so after?
Correct. After he left Superior Court the following day, on the Saturday, late at night, he went to her apartment.
Right.
And he stayed. It was after midnight when the recording was made, to the best of our understanding.
So I'm trying to get, okay, got that. I guess there was also some discussion that Attorney Bradel sent private investigators over to her house on Saturday and that one was detained. Do you know anything about that?
I know very little. I just heard the same thing you heard. I'm not involved with the investigation that Medfield is conducting.
Right. This particular piece is obviously a domestic situation, but it doesn't matter. His bail would be revoked. There are some people that are speculating that this was a setup. His attorney included, saying that, this particular thing here was just an attempt to get his bail revoked and have him incarcerated. Did you have this happening on your bingo card, like that it was going to be a domestic situation? Or, you said earlier you were pretty confident that he was going to violate, this in some way, just with his attitude post hearing on Friday. What are your thoughts about that, especially considering you're saying she came to you first?
Right. We did not anticipate this set of events to happen. We thought he would be going to another witness or beginning his visits to their homes, etc. That's what we anticipated. We did not anticipate anything involving this particular witness.
What's the next step in this process for him? I know that the conversation includes him potentially being incarcerated for up to 90 days. What's your take on the timeline?
Uh, we we have obviously pretrial conferences scheduled after the first of the year in both the Superior Court and the District Court. I would imagine he'll be held after those dates as well. In terms of how we proceed, we have discovery to provide to the defendant's counsel, and it's just going to proceed in the ordinary course of a criminal matter.
So, do you anticipate, how long do you foresee him? Do you want him incarcerated? Do you think that's the best thing in this overall case, the Karen Read case? Do you think his incarceration is important to the process surrounding that case in itself?
We have an obligation to protect witnesses, and based upon his conduct, we feel that the only way to continue to protect witnesses is to have him held. We believe he poses a threat to those witnesses, yes.
There's a very good case for him and what he does to be covered under the umbrella of First Amendment, as well as his role as a journalist. It seems like there's a very fine line there. What's your opinion on that as far as him, approaching people outside courthouses? Would that not fall under, his job as a journalist?
Well, we view him as a blogger more than a journalist. It is the type of conduct he's engaged in does not even comply with the standards that journalists have established for themselves. So we look at him as something other than that. But even if he were to be deemed as a journalist, his activities are simply illegal. Being a journalist does not serve as a shield to allow him to violate the law. Intimidating witnesses is a violation of the law. And these are things that we simply can't permit to happen.
Aside from Aiden's case and this particular recent arrest and then him being incarcerated, the Karen Read case itself, how difficult of a case is this for you to navigate through, just in regards to the evidence, the changing public opinion on this case? How has that case, kind of matched up against other cases for you?
I have isolated myself from the Karen Read case pretty much in its entirety.
Okay.
Other than for the fact that the witnesses involved are witnesses in the Karen Read case, I've had no interaction with the district attorneys involved in Karen Read in terms of their prosecution, nor do I want to. My attention has been given to Mr. Kearney and to his activities with respect to the witnesses. They could be witnesses in the Karen Read case or any other case. It's irrelevant. It's just involving his activities and the fact that we feel he has violated the law on numerous occasions with respect to the witnesses themselves.
So your cases are adjacent, but they're not connected. Do you have any communication with the district attorney's office at all in regards to this recent incarceration? Do you speak with them at all?
Well, I mean, they're certainly aware of it, and the detectives I'm working with are based out of the district attorney's office. So we have some contact regarding it, obviously, but the contact is minimal. And for instance, I don't seek any advance approval from the district attorney's office regarding anything I do.
Okay.
And that's the way District Attorney Morrissey established my involvement, that I was strictly on my own. I was acting as an independent prosecutor, and that is how I see my role. I'm not, I have no horse in the race in terms of Karen Read. None. That's not relevant to me.
Let me just ask how you, if you could predict how this case with Aiden is going to play out. How do you anticipate this is going to end?
Well, we're confident that a juror of his peers will find him guilty on this particular case. We believe the evidence is pretty much overwhelming. In the last instance, you had mentioned that this is a domestic case. That's not completely true. It's a domestic case, but it also involved the intimidation of a witness.
Right.
It's clear that Mr. Kearney had demanded her phone, took notes from her phone with respect to contacts. I know that my name and my phone number was in handwritten notes that Mr. Kearney had made. The witness had taken that paper with his notes and basically put it under her shirt because she did not want Mr. Kearney to leave with those notes. And obviously some things have transpired in the interim between the time he took the notes and the time that she took the notes from the table. But either way, the violence that's alleged, the domestic violence, was when he struggled with her to try to take the notes and shoved her, and she fell up against the couch.
Right.
That was the domestic violence, but it was completely geared toward her involvement as a witness.
How did she have your name and your phone number? So she was willingly giving him, I'm just thinking this over, she was willingly giving him this information, and then she kind of had a change of heart. She didn't want him to take those things with him.
As I argued in court, Mr. Kearney is a master manipulator. This is a young lady, substantially younger than he is. He was involved in a relationship with her, and he manipulated her to his benefit. When based upon the situation, I think you can find the information publicly as to what occurred in the apartment itself. Mm-hmm. Mr. Kearney wanted to leave with those notes, and the witness felt that she was being abandoned by him after she had taken some steps,
right,
that he encouraged her to take. Here, Mr. Kearney, when she realized that Mr. Kearney really didn't have any concern for her whatsoever, there was somewhat of a change of heart when she realized that he was just simply using her.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and I did read some of those interactions. I mean, could this just be a personal vendetta then, that she, wasn't getting, the commitment or the affection from him that she wanted, and then, kind of flipped the script on him and said, if you don't stay with me or what have you, now I'm going to kind of do this? I'm just thinking about it from that way.
Absolutely not. That's not the case.
Okay. So I think I asked a little earlier, but I just didn't remember what you said. What's the timeline on this? So there's going to be a couple pre-trial conferences, right? You're saying coming. What's the first one? Do you have a date?
I do, but I don't have them ready.
That's all right. That's all right. Want to send them to me maybe, or I'll text you and you can give me the next one?
I can do that, sure.
All right. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to add to the story, or anything you want to add?
Other than the fact that it's the Commonwealth's goal is to protect its witnesses in a case. It's not that we're trying to stifle any type of journalism. It's the fact that these people are entitled to be able to leave their home without being harassed and intimidated.
Right.
And that has not been the case. There have been, pleas, there have been warnings issued in the past, the first by the district attorney's office, saying that these people should be, leave the witnesses alone. And it's not a matter of asking the questions. That's fine. Asking questions is fine. Chasing someone with a bullhorn and yelling at them that you're a murderer that's not journalistic in nature. That's being an advocate. That's clearly intimidating, and that's what these people have had to deal with. No one wants to be a witness in a criminal event. These people did not wake up one morning and say, "Geez, let's do something that makes us all witnesses so we can be a protected class." If you walk into an establishment and business and you observe a shooting, you become a witness in the case, whether you want to or not. And as a witness, you're going to be called forward to do your civic duty and to testify honestly and truthfully about the events as you perceive them to occur. If there are people who are in support of the individual who was arrested and charged, and you believe you identify that person and said, yes, this is the individual who I saw in the store shooting the store owner, whatever the case may be, because people support that individual who's accused, does not give them the right to chase you down wherever you are, to yell at you through a bullhorn, to parade people by your home and say, this person is a murderer, they're a liar. They're covering for the person that really did it. And that's what's happened here. And it's wrong.
Just thinking, if If a regular person outside of a journalist or a blogger, as you say, chose to do these exact same things, they themselves would also be charged and prosecuted like a regular person.
Absolutely.
So he's got, obviously got a lot of followers. It's been kind of convoluted where some of those followers have also kind of been involved. They can also be prosecuted and charged. It's not exclusive to him and his role as a journalist.
Absolutely not exclusive to him, no.
Okay.
And again, we a journalist has certain standards. At least your industry has established standards for journalism. And some experts in the field have already, made the comment that Mr. Kearney's conduct has violated those standards, if you will.
Right.
They're not consistent with the journalist. We realize that there are different forms of journalism, going back to muckraking journalists and whatever the case may be, but the line is drawn where it becomes intimidation and criminal in nature. What I can tell you is I gave my high school commencement address in 1974, and that was at the height of Watergate and all of the issues that we had in Washington, D.C. And one of the things I addressed in my commencement speech was how important it was that we have a First Amendment and freedom of the press. I don't feel any less about that now than I did then. I think freedom of the press is one of the most important foundations upon which this country is based. We do not have conduct here that is like the press in nature. Simply because somebody blogs and says I'm a journalist does not give them the right to intimidate and harass people and literally make them afraid to leave their homes. And Mr. Kearney has done that, and that's not going to be tolerated.
Attorney Mello, I appreciate you taking the time and answering these questions. You're very thorough. It gave me a really good understanding and explanation on some things I didn't quite understand. I want to be able to share this information with the public, so I'm going to do my best to write this up in the best way. I'll send it over to you for your review. Make sure everything is appropriate and it's got your approval, and then we'll try to get it out sometime today.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to take a deep dive into this Aiden Kearney arrest.
Okay.
And, it's a story that's got a lot of people talking.
Yeah, it's a wild one.
Yeah, and there's a lot of accusations flying around about, like, potential witness manipulation.
Right, and this case is like it's connected to all these other cases where you have these high-profile prosecutions that involve, like, police misconduct and evidence tampering.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important for our listener to know that Kearney, he's not just like any journalist.
Right.
This is a guy who's known for calling out authority figures, particularly in law enforcement.
Yeah.
So when he gets involved with this Karen Reed case,
Right.
and he ends up organizing this rally in support of her, like a week later, he finds himself arrested for witness intimidation.
And it's like, what intimidation are we even talking about?
Right. It's really unclear, like, what are the details of this supposed intimidation?
Totally.
Like, who did he intimidate? What did he actually do?
Right.
It's very vague.
Yeah, and then it gets even more strange.
Okay.
So days after this arrest for witness intimidation, his ex-girlfriend goes to the special prosecutor, Ken Mello, and says that she's pregnant with Aiden Kearney's child.
Oh, wow.
And she even has, like, a photo to prove it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So, like, what's wrong with that?
Well, so the photo that she had was actually taken 4 years earlier. So it makes you wonder if someone was trying to, like, create evidence out of thin air.
Yeah.
And then, to make matters worse, the ex-girlfriend invites Kearney over to her apartment. And things get heated, and she accuses him of assault.
Oh, no.
And so now he's arrested a second time, this time for allegedly intimidating the ex-girlfriend.
Okay.
So now he's facing 2 charges of witness intimidation, both based on the account of this ex-girlfriend.
Right, right. And this is where his lawyer drops this letter.
Yes.
That really kind of blows the lid off this whole thing.
Right, because this letter is raising some really serious concerns about her credibility.
Yeah.
And whether she's being used by law enforcement.
Right.
And so remember we talked about how they did that cell phone extraction?
Right.
Well, there's some really important information missing from her phone.
It's like they went in and, like, took out what they wanted and just left the rest.
Yeah, and the lawyer's letter points this out very clearly.
Okay.
That there are entire text conversations missing, including conversations between the ex-girlfriend and the special prosecutor, Ken Mello himself.
What?
Yes. and the lead investigator on the case.
So this isn't just like, hey, what are you doing?
Mhm.
Kind of text messages.
No, not at all. The timing of these messages and the fact that they were deleted is very suspicious.
Okay, so like what kind of suspicious stuff are we talking about?
Well, for example, just days before Kearney is arrested for allegedly intimidating his ex-girlfriend,
Okay.
she's texting with this former state trooper
Right.
named Leah Genduso.
And who is that? And why is that important?
So Genduso has it out for Kearney because he had previously exposed her for some misconduct.
Okay.
And so in these text messages, Genduso is basically celebrating the idea of Kearney going away for a substantial period of time.
Wow.
And at one point, Genduso even sends the ex-girlfriend a media file. And guess what?
Right.
That media file is completely missing from the extraction report.
Oh, wow. So it's like, what was in that file that was so important to delete?
Exactly. And could it have helped Kearney's case? It makes you wonder.
Yeah, it does.
And then it gets even more interesting because it turns out that the ex-girlfriend was also in contact with another person who is no fan of Kearney,
Okay.
this woman named Catherine Peter.
Okay.
And from what we can gather, Peter seems to have convinced the ex-girlfriend that she had a direct line to the special prosecutor.
Oh, wow.
And she even bragged about having these off-the-record conversations with him.
Wow, that's ballsy.
It is. And guess what else?
What?
All of the text messages between Peter and the ex-girlfriend, they disappear from the report right around the time that she starts talking about meeting with the prosecutor and investigators.
Wow. It's like they're trying to cover their tracks.
It is. And it's like someone is trying to erase any evidence that maybe these accusations against Kearney were orchestrated.
Yeah, or that she was being coached.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's where this case gets really, really serious because you're talking about the possibility of fabricated evidence
Right.
being used to silence a journalist
Yeah.
who has been a thorn in the side of law enforcement.
Yeah, and this isn't just about Kearney anymore, right?
Exactly. This is way bigger than just one journalist.
Right. This is about like,
This is about freedom of the press.
yeah, and like, are they going to come after other people?
Right? Like, who else are they doing this to? And this is where those parallel cases that you were talking about earlier come in.
Right.
Because it's not just that the ex-girlfriend's phone data has these convenient gaps.
Right.
It turns out that the same officers involved in extracting the data from her phone
Yeah.
are also involved in similar evidence tampering scandals.
What?
Yes, and we're talking multiple high-profile cases in the same county.
So this isn't just a coincidence.
It's starting to look like a pattern.
Right. It's like every time these officers get involved, suddenly all this evidence disappears. It always seems to benefit the prosecution.
That's right. And it's not just text messages.
Okay.
Think back to the Karen Reed case that we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
You know how we were talking about Trooper Gorino,
Right.
the officer who was also involved in Kearney's case?
Yes.
Well, he was in charge of extracting data from a key witness's phone in that case as well.
Oh, wow.
And guess what?
What?
A bunch of key information was missing from that extraction, too.
No way.
Yes, and they were eventually able to recover some of that data.
Okay.
And it revealed deleted phone calls, text messages, even Google searches that completely contradicted what the prosecution was saying.
Oh, my God.
And it gets even crazier because this goes even further back.
Right.
Remember that really sad case of Sandra Birchmore?
Yes.
So it was initially ruled a suicide, but the FBI recently reopened her case as a homicide.
Oh, wow.
And they actually arrested former police officer Matthew Farwell for her murder.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and guess who examined Farwell's phones during that initial investigation?
I'm not even going to guess.
Trooper Guarino.
No.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. The same guy.
The same guy.
Oh, my God.
And you can probably guess what happened next.
No.
Even though they had tens of thousands of messages between Birchmore and Farwell,
Right.
none of them were flagged or reported by the investigators.
Oh, my gosh. So they just like conveniently ignored all of that?
It seems that way, and it wasn't until the FBI got involved with their own forensic experts that this evidence was finally uncovered.
Wow. It's just so hard to believe that it's just a coincidence that every time these officers are involved, suddenly key evidence just goes missing.
Right, and it always seems to help the prosecution,
Yeah.
and it always seems to be used against people who have been critical of those in power, like Kearney.
Yeah, like what is really going on here?
Right.
Is this just incompetence or is something else going on here?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that leads us to this interview with Ken Mello,
Okay.
the special prosecutor himself.
Okay.
Because this interview is really interesting when you compare it to the lawyer's letter.
Okay.
Because there are all these contradictions.
Like what?
Well, for example, Mello claims that Kearney's ex-girlfriend just came to his office completely on her own.
Yeah.
But we have these text messages
Right.
suggesting that she was already talking to people who claimed to have his ear
Yeah.
long before she made those accusations.
Right. So she's saying one thing,
Right.
and the text messages are telling a completely different story.
Exactly. And then he also insists that the assault allegations are totally legitimate.
Okay.
But when you look at the timing of it all,
Yeah.
and the fact that she previously tried to mislead Kearney with that fake pregnancy photo,
Right.
it makes you wonder if those accusations were ever real.
Right. Were those just made up to discredit him?
It's possible, but perhaps the most telling detail
Okay.
is how Mello talks about Kearney's job as a journalist,
Okay.
because he keeps calling him a blogger.
Right. Like to discredit him.
Exactly. And it's subtle,
Right.
but it's very telling.
Yeah, it's like he doesn't see Kearney as a real journalist.
Exactly. And that's why I think we need to take a step back
Oh, yeah.
and look at the bigger picture here.
Okay.
What are the motivations behind these accusations?
Right. Is this really about witness intimidation?
Exactly. Or is there something more going on here?
Right, because the timing of everything is just so suspect.
It is.
Kearney organizes this rally that makes law enforcement look bad. And then, bam, he gets hit with all these charges that could land him in jail for years.
It's very convenient for them.
Right.
And remember, all of this hinges on the accounts of people who have some serious credibility issues.
Yeah.
It's important for our listener to know that we're not here to take sides.
Right.
We're just presenting the facts as they have been reported and highlighting the questions that we think deserve answers.
Right. We're not saying Kearney's a saint.
Right.
Or that the prosecutors are evil or anything.
We're just trying to give you the information you need
Right.
to come to your own conclusions.
Right. And this is a really complicated case.
It is.
But it's important to understand because it affects all of us.
It really does, because this case is about more than just this one journalist.
Right.
It's about the freedom of the press.
Right. And the potential for abuse of power.
Exactly. And when those in authority feel threatened, they often resort to desperate measures to hold on to that power.
And it feels like that's what's happening here.
It does.
You've got the missing evidence,
Right.
the questionable witnesses, the attempts to discredit Kearney and silence him.
It's all very suspicious.
It is, and it reminds us that even though we think we have these rights,
Yes.
things can change very quickly.
They can.
And this is happening in real life.
This is really happening.
With real people.
To real people. And it shows you how those in power can use the system to silence their critics.
Yeah, and this case really highlights how easily things like text messages and digital files can just disappear.
Right. And this isn't just something that happens to journalists or other people.
This could happen to any of us.
Exactly. And that's why this case is so important.
It's a huge deal, and it feels like something out of a movie or a TV show.
It does. But unfortunately, this is real life.
And it makes you wonder, like, who's really in control here?
Exactly. And who's looking out for us?
Right. And are we safe?
That is the question, isn't it?
It is.
And it's a question that we need to be asking ourselves more and more these days.
So where do we go from here? What happens next in this case?
It's impossible to say for sure, but one thing is certain, this story is far from over.
It's just getting started. And as this case unfolds, it's up to all of us to pay attention to how it's being covered.
Yes.
Who is benefiting from this narrative?
Exactly.
And what lengths they'll go to silence dissenting voices.
Because the truth is out there.
It is, and it's up to all of us to find it.
That's right. It really makes you think about, how our justice system is supposed to work and how it actually works.
Right.
And when you see these inconsistencies and you start to think about the possibility that this is part of a larger pattern,
Right.
it's concerning.
It is, and I think it's really important to remember that Kearney, he has a history of ruffling feathers.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, this is a guy who is not afraid to speak truth to power.
Right. And that's really important when you think about why someone might want to try to discredit him.
Right.
He was really focused on police misconduct.
Right.
And it wasn't just that he was reporting on these cases. He was actively trying to get justice for people he thought had been wronged.
Right. Like he was making a difference.
He was. And so when you have somebody who is that actively involved and who's willing to put themselves out there like that,
Yeah.
it's not surprising that there would be some pushback.
Right. And so we've got this journalist who's known for challenging authority, and he suddenly finds himself facing these serious charges
Yeah.
based on questionable evidence.
Yeah.
And then you've got these people with their own baggage.
Right. And let's not forget about all of that missing data.
Oh, right.
I mean, those text messages, could really be the key to all of this.
Right. Like, what are they hiding?
Exactly, and why go through all the trouble of deleting them unless there's something to hide?
Right. It's not like you accidentally delete hundreds of text messages.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
especially not the ones that are really important to the case.
Right.
So you got to think there's something more to it than that.
Right. And I think this is where we also have to remember that we're talking about people's lives here.
Absolutely.
This isn't just some game.
This is serious stuff.
Right. And so I think it's important to just take a step back and really look at all the details and all the inconsistencies.
Yeah. And one of the biggest inconsistencies is how the special prosecutor is portraying Kearney.
You mean how he keeps calling him a blogger?
Yes, because by calling him a blogger,
Yeah.
he's basically trying to undermine Kearney's credibility.
Right. Like, he's not a real journalist, so we shouldn't believe anything he says.
Exactly.
Which is such a classic tactic.
Oh, it's the oldest trick in the book.
Right. It's so much easier to attack the person than it is to actually address the issues.
Exactly. And when you start to add everything up,
Right.
the missing data, the questionable witnesses, all of it,
Yeah.
you have to wonder if Kearney is being punished for his work exposing the police.
It's like they're trying to make an example out of him.
Right, don't mess with us or we'll come after you.
Exactly.
And that's why it's so important for us to be really careful about what we believe.
Right.
We can't just take everything at face value.
Right. Especially when it comes from people in power.
Exactly, because they often have something to gain by keeping us in the dark.
Okay, so let's try to connect the dots here.
Okay.
So we've got all these different cases, Karen Reed, Sandra Birchmore, Justin Root,
Right.
and all of these cases have these allegations of police misconduct.
Yes.
And then you've got the evidence tampering. And in a lot of these cases, you've got the same officers involved.
Right.
And every time it seems like these officers are involved, suddenly evidence goes missing, and it just so happens to benefit the prosecution.
Right. And at some point, it stops being a coincidence and starts to feel like there's a much bigger problem here.
Right, and I think that's what's so concerning about all of this.
It is.
Because if these allegations are true,
Right.
it means that the people who are supposed to be protecting us
Yes.
are actually the ones who are abusing their power.
And that's a really scary thought.
It is scary, and it's why this case is so important,
It's bigger than just Aiden Kearney.
right? It's about all of us.
It is, because if it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone.
And I think that's what we really need to remember here.
We do.
It's kind of like if you see something, say something. Right.
Exactly. You can't just ignore it.
Right, because
Yes.
if we don't say anything, then who will?
Right. Somebody has to speak up.
Exactly. And this is bigger than just, police misconduct or evidence tampering.
Right. This is about our rights.
Right. This is about freedom of the press.
Exactly. And our right to hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even in this digital age, where everything is like online and everything is recorded,
Right.
that evidence can disappear.
It can, and it does.
Yeah. And it makes you realize that, all those text messages that we send
Yeah.
and all the files that we think are private, they may not be.
Exactly. And, it's easy to think that this kind of thing only happens to other people,
Right.
People who are involved in these big cases.
Right. This would never happen to me.
Right. Or somebody I know. But the truth is, it can happen to anyone.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so scary about all of this.
It is scary, and it can feel really overwhelming.
It does. Like, what are we even supposed to do?
Well, I think the first step is just being aware,
Okay.
educating yourself about what's going on.
Right.
Paying attention to these stories.
Okay.
And supporting journalists who are out there risking their necks to uncover the truth.
And I think it's also about, like you were saying earlier, connecting the dots.
Yes, exactly.
Like noticing when the same things keep happening.
Right.
And the same people are involved.
And asking why.
Right. And demanding answers.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Right. Because the more questions we ask,
Yeah.
the harder it is for them to keep doing this.
That's right, because they don't want people looking too closely.
Right. They want to keep us in the dark.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on the Aiden Kearney case,
Okay.
I think the biggest takeaway here is that this story is far from over.
Oh, it's just beginning.
Right. And it's up to all of us to keep paying attention,
Absolutely.
to keep asking questions.
Yes.
And to never stop fighting for the truth.
Because the truth matters.
It does. And we can't let them win.
We can't.
We have to keep fighting for what's right.
We do.
So thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
And until next time, stay informed, stay engaged,
And stay vigilant.
because the truth is out there.